Welcome to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. Because food isn't just food, it's health, community, politics, and economy. And this conversation, and many like it, can emanate from the center of your plate. I'm your host, Dana DePrima. Today is a continuation of last week's episode featuring farmer Dave Fischer of Fischer Farms in Indiana. If you missed last week's episode, I recommend queuing that one up at some point, but you can start here with this part of the conversation. I thought it was interesting and meaningful and something that we should all be thinking about, our systems. In the first episode, Dave walks us through what it actually looks like to build a transparent beef supply chain from the ground up. He is open, honest, and really transparent about some key questions we all have, but don't often get the chance to ask. And not that many farmers and ranchers are brave enough to discuss a work in progress the way Dave is. We talk about methane headlines versus real data, soil biology, pricing pressure on farmers, and what happens when just 4 processors control most of America's meat. It's foundational. In this episode, we go deeper. I'm asking questions that have been on my mind, and Dave is a willing and enthusiastic partner in considering what we might need in the future. We talk about why farmers' markets, as meaningful as they are, can't carry the weight of a national food system. We talk about nutrient density, soil microbes, traceability, school lunches, regenerative claims, and why making better food choices easier matters more than asking people to try harder. Dave shares what he's seeing firsthand as a farmer who sells directly to restaurants, schools, and communities, and what gives him hope in a system that often feels stacked against small farms. This is a conversation about visibility versus anonymity, about rebuilding trust, about what happens when eaters start asking better questions, and about why the future of food won't come from nostalgia, but from redesigning systems so that real nourishment fits into real lives. Before we jump in, I want to say this. One Bite is Everything is a very active podcast. It's in the top 3% of all podcasts globally. And according to Spotify's recent Wrapped report, this show receives more comments, questions, and engagement than 88% of all podcasts on the platform. That tells me something important. You're not just listening. You're thinking. You're responding. You're showing up. And now there's a new place for this conversation to continue. I've launched a Substack, which you'll find linked in the show notes. That's where I'm expanding on these episodes, sharing deeper context and opening space for your questions, reflections, and ideas. Think of it as the ongoing field notes for this movement. You can be a part of this community here on One Bite is Everything, and through the For Farmers movement, where farmers and eaters come together to ask thoughtful questions, consider real answers, and take actions that actually make a difference. For years, the dominant response to food insecurity and declining health has been deceptively simple. Eat local and go to your farmer's market. While well-intentioned and deeply supportive of small farmers and local producers, this narrative has become a kind of shorthand solution that obscures the real complexity of the problem. It assumes access, time, geography, and financial flexibility that many people simply don't have, and it treats food insecurity as an individual choice rather than a structural condition shaped by region, infrastructure, and policy. Farmers markets play an essential role in rebuilding trust between eaters and growers, but they were never designed to function as a national food system. What works in one region, where climate, density, and distribution networks align, may be impossible in another. Rural food deserts, urban supply chains, seasonal limitations, and regional growing constraints all complicate the idea that local is a universal solution. When we flatten these differences, we risk romanticizing access while ignoring the systems that actually determine who can eat well and who cannot. We don't need a return to the past to fix the food system. We need a reinvention of how food reaches people. Farmers markets have played an essential role in reconnecting eaters with growers, but they were never designed to carry the weight of a national food crisis. They function more like cultural touchpoints than infrastructure, beautiful, educational, human, but limited by time, geography, and scale. Treating them as the solution risks mistaking proximity for progress. What we actually need is something parallel, a system that preserves transparency, relationship, and biological integrity while meeting people where they already are. A real food revolution won't be driven by guilt or idealism. It will be driven by ease, trust, and evidence. People are not unwilling to care, but they are exhausted by systems that demand extra effort to do the right thing. If the most nourishing food requires navigating multiple barriers, higher cost, limited access, confusing labels, it will remain niche. The next evolution of food must make the better choice the easier choice, without pushing the cost burden back onto farmers who are already being squeezed by processors, infrastructure gaps, and commodity pricing models. Let's pick up this conversation that Dave and I started and get back into it. Sometimes people treat farmers markets as a novelty. Maybe they don't have an online purveyor that they are familiar with, like you, where they can get it from Indiana to California or Oregon or New York or wherever, right? And I think that's growing. I've spoken with other ranchers who are like, yeah, we're just going direct now. And we cut out all of that, maybe in a different way. This is my analogy. Like when I was growing up, we did not have an iPhone, right? My parents didn't have a color TV. And so this technology advances, and every generation kind of has this new thing that defines how the generation is organized around radio, TV, iPhone. I feel like the black and white TV, and as much as I love farmers markets, it's a little bit, it's great. And they're amazing across the country, and I love going to them, and I have events at them, and I think it's a wonderful place to meet a farmer face to face.
Totally agree.
I guess I'm just worried. Sometimes a crisis breeds innovation, and I believe that there is a bubbling food crisis. I think what we talked about in terms of the four processors is a real squeeze on farmers. I think small farmers, they can't invest in all the infrastructure that they need in order to be efficient. And I just wonder what your perspective is on this. Like with a bubbling food crisis, which I believe is there and has a lot of different factors, and there are things that exacerbate it, whether it's politics or whether they're our own politics or foreign politics, right? Squeezes. I'm just wondering what you think needs to be done in order for us to sort of revolutionize where we are with food. And I don't mean more industrialized food. I mean more people caring very deeply about the flavor of their carrots and what's in the soil and all of that.
And the nutrition side, I think, to me, I feel like we have a health crisis. All of my friends that I know that have had cancer and so forth, to me, I think there's going to be an awakening of understanding. And I just saw a report again yesterday that all these chemicals that are put into our food as preservatives are really, at the end of the day, they're linking now to cancer. We host restaurants touring our farm just about one a week. And I'd love to pull into my cabinet and pull out the package of buns that have been there for over 2 years. And there's not a speck of mold on it. And we just did this a couple of days ago. We had a restaurant in. And the question is, if you make fresh bread, how long does it last in your cabinet? 4 days, 5 days, a week. And this stuff's been there for 2 or 3 years. And yeah, it's hard, but there's no mold on it. To me, I think people have to or will understand that we have this health crisis. How did we get into this health crisis? And I think that's a big part of the food pyramid and what they're doing there. And I love the fact that the USDA, from my knowledge and what I saw, was not influenced by big food or even big ag to say this is what should be on the food pyramid. They really went to the science side of things. And I think that's somewhat remarkable for government to not get influenced by the lobbyist. And so I really love that. And I'm hoping now that gets out to the individuals and they understand that a big part of our health crisis is what we have been eating. And so how do we fix that? And to me, it's a combination of buying direct from the farmer, knowing where your food comes from, but also kind of digging into the details of it as well.
This oversimplification becomes especially dangerous when food insecurity is tightly linked to the growing health crisis. Chronic illness, cancer, metabolic disease, and behavioral challenges are not emerging in a vacuum. They are downstream effects of a food system optimized for cheap, shelf-stable calories rather than biological nourishment. Telling people to eat better without changing what food is available, affordable, and trusted misses the point. Health outcomes cannot improve if the underlying food environment remains unchanged.
Recently at a conference, organic conference, where Dr. Dan Kettridge talked about the nutrition in different vegetables and so forth. And just to kind of narrow down, I'll talk about carrots. He showed the carrots and like a vitamin A, vitamin D, and so forth. But in one carrot, it maybe have 40 times the nutrient density of another carrot. And when he graphed them and showed us the difference, it was just phenomenal. But it wasn't a bell curve. It was more of a scatter plot. It was just all over the place. And he tried to really analyze what makes a difference. Is it because if I have a carrot that comes out of my garden, I would think that would be high. No, that was not the thing that did it. It was not that it was organic or certified organic or even certain varieties. The only thing that made a difference that correlated with the improved nutrition was the biology in the soil. I can go into way too much detail on this, but it really comes down to how much biology you have, that you have the really good aerobic biology in the soil that really helps that crop produce and free up those nutrients and make those available to the plants. So we're getting ready to get started on a big nutrition analysis on our farm and really try to understand where we're at on a nutrient basis. We feel like we should be very good because we're very much so forage-based. And every time I do Haney test, which tests for biology in the soil, I'm always at the very high, mainly because I have cows. But we also protect the soil with the cover crops and all those kind of things. So I believe we'll be very good on the nutrient analysis. And I feel like that's almost the latest thing. It seems like, yeah, people want it to be local, but they want it to be local because then they know how it was raised and where it was raised. They know where it came from is probably more important than it came from 5 miles down the road. I want to understand their process. I want to understand that, hey, I'm getting good nutrient and I can trust that this isn't some crap product that was imported. It's been frozen 5 times and all those kind of things, which happens today in so much of the meat that, when you go to the grocery stores, you really don't know where it came from and what the process behind it. I can go on about horror stories that I've seen of how they revamp meat to make it look nice and pretty and pink at the store, but the background is just awful on it. So people have lost faith in that supply chain. And they're looking for a local supply chain that they can understand where it comes from and knows what the process is. And I really think that traceability, that visibility into the supply chain is really critical for the next steps I think we need to take as a country. And again, if you look at Europe, and during my supply chain days, I spent a lot of time in Germany and really understanding that they eat locally. They eat good quality things in Europe. And we've gotten into this industrial food supply system where it's like every farm, it's not from here, this region or anything. It's just a ribeye. It's a commodity product.
At the heart of this reinvention is a shift away from anonymity. Industrial food systems thrive on invisibility, stripped of origin, process, and accountability. The emerging alternative isn't simply local. It's legible. People want to know how food was grown, what the soil was doing, how animals were raised, and whether the nutrition promised actually exists. This is why traceability matters more than distance. and why trust is increasingly built through process rather than labels. When food carries a story that can be verified, not marketed, it changes how people relate to what they eat. And so is that a consumer demand issue?
I think it's a consumer understanding that, how messed up the industrial food system is now. And as they understand that, I think they will be demanding it.
In the regenerative space, it has long been of interest to me. But one of my concerns about it is that people like to throw this word around.
Yes.
I feel like if I'm speaking to a farmer at my farmer's market and they say they're regenerative, I can ask them questions and understand how they're approaching that and what that means. But when, there's a label and it says regenerative and there's no standard for that, then I worry.
And you should. There are no standards. Natural is the typical example. When you see natural in the grocery store, all that means is they did not add any chemicals during processing. It has nothing to do with how the animal was raised. And yeah, it's better than nothing, but at least you're not getting sodium, water, and everything else added. But it really doesn't talk about how the animal was raised.
So buyer beware. I think also some advice that I also think is wise is that if the Cheez-Its say regenerative, buy them. Because then at least you're signaling to the marketplace that you want regenerative stuff.
Right.
I have mixed feelings about that, but over Cheez-Its, if I had a choice between the two, I would go for the regenerative ones myself.
There are a lot of big companies who are sincerely interested in regenerative. The one conference I was at where we talked a lot about greenhouse gas reductions, I had some really good discussions with Cargill.
They interested in
just what were the results of our study, and our study being our life cycle assessment. What are the practical things you can do to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint? Their issue is they don't own the cattle till the last minute. How are they going to dictate back to the farmer the practices? And then they're out there buying a commodity product and turning it into a commodity product. So it's a tough nut for the big guys to crack.
I've been having a lot of these conversations recently, is that when the market is creating a product that people want and it's offered at a good price, we will change our practices.
To me, there's a little bit of the marketing side of things. People have to find out about it. They have to have it available. It has to be easy. We can't expect customers to jump through hoops, change their buying habits, not go out to eat, cook at home more, all those kind of things. At the end of the day, they're going to do what they've been doing. Hopefully we can make it easy for them to select the regenerative, local product, nutritious product versus the other one, and easy on their checkbook as well.
This is also where chefs, schools, and institutions become pivotal. They act as translators between complexity and daily life, turning biological intelligence into flavor, consistency, and demand. When nutrient-dense food is embedded into places people already eat, restaurants, cafeterias, community kitchens, it stops being a lifestyle choice and starts becoming a cultural norm. That's how real change scales, not by asking everyone to become an expert, but by redesigning the system so expertise is built in.
As I was getting ready for this podcast, I started thinking about all the things I could go into detail on, like K through 12 schools and how we managed those. And it's really been fascinating. 5 years ago, I would have told you we're not a fit for K through 12. We're too expensive. And my son, Joseph, who is our sales manager, and we started working with a local chef who was using our product in a school. He left that, and now he works part-time for us, going into schools and explaining to them how this can be more cost-effective. Our local school had a 35% participation rate. So 35% of the students buy a meal. 30% of those were actually getting it for free. So only 5% of the kids were actually buying a meal. And the rest are, brown bagging it. And so when you increase that by 5 percentage point, it pays for them buying our product. And we've seen in numerous schools that you double participation rate. They have to open up another line when they know they're getting a local food.
I want to talk about that because, I know that schools have some limitations in terms of procurement, like they have to take the lowest price or they're only allowed to look at, certain suppliers
And they
that
don't
have
cook
built-in
anymore.
efficiencies, but not necessarily with a health as a priority.
And I just used our local school as an example when I was talking to Secretary Rollins, and I showed her the ingredient list. And it's literally 40 ingredients for a hamburger patty. It starts off with beef. It is the number one ingredient, but then it's quickly soybean meal and then water and then all the ingredients to make it taste and have nutrition to meet the nutrition school's guidelines. So they add in 30 some more chemicals and the burger is awful. People don't like it. Kids don't want to eat it. And, one of our workers said students refuse to eat the school lunch. And I'm like, oh, come on. You're not better than anybody else. You should eat the lunch. He said, I went in and tried to eat the burger. And I said, okay, I understand why you're not eating this. So anyways, my son and Jeff Fell is the guy. They've worked together. They've got a spreadsheet made up to show the schools how this is more beneficial because at the end of the day, they're going to have the same labor, the same utilities, all those overhead costs are the same. But now you're getting more students to pay for their lunch.
I was suggesting that the federal government, in creating this new pyramid and talking about how important eating real food is, I think it's a signal to the companies that are creating those processed foods to clean things up. But I think that the federal government, if they are making this statement about eating real food a priority in schools, for our military personnel, in our government cafeterias, like where they're doing either the purchasing or, the funding of the purchasing very specifically, that would be a real game changer.
Local Food for Schools program that ran for about a year and a half. It's wound down quite a bit now, but most of that's gone. So I would love to see that restarted, but in a different way. And it also requires training of the staff. One of the food service directors told me that their knife skills are box cutters. Basically, they take a box cutter, open up a package, dump it into a warmer. That's their skills in the kitchen. But it was also interesting, just 2 weeks ago, we hosted a group from a local school in our house. We were serving a meal and so forth. Everybody there wants to get back to cooking good food. They don't want to serve this horrible crap. My sister-in-law works in a school cafeteria, and she literally says she has to turn her head away when she opens these bags because of the smell.
Nobody wants that. The kids don't want to eat it. Yeah. They don't want to serve it.
And I look at it, we'll spend $6-7 on a Starbucks, but we won't spend 30 cents to make our kids' lunches better. And then we wonder why they're not behaving after lunch. All those kind of things, just we've gotten to where it's just cheap, low cost is the answer to everything.
Got to change that. That's the revolution I'm talking about.
I totally agree.
If there is a revolution coming, and science suggests there is, it won't look like a rejection of modernity. It will look like a recalibration of value, away from cheap calories and toward real nourishment, away from opacity and toward understanding, away from novelty and toward resilience. The future of food isn't about going backwards. It's about building something smarter, something that honors biology, supports farmers, protects health, and fits into real lives. That was the second part of my conversation with Dave Fischer of Fischer Farms. I think it was worth it to break it up so that we all have a moment to think, to parse out what's happening on the front lines of a farm that is pushing the boundaries of how we operate regionally with regards to our food and the systems we need to support that development, and then to dive into some bigger questions that we need to be considering very seriously. We need change, a revolution of our food system, a turning around, so to speak, so that it serves us better. Better food, better environmental outcomes, better health outcomes, better support for our rural communities, the kind of support that's inherent in a thriving economy, and food security for those same communities and for the nation as a whole. It can happen, but you have to be a part of the conversation to move the needle, plain and simple. If this episode sparked something for you, I encourage you to go back and listen to part 1, where we set the stage for everything you heard today. The supply chain realities, the methane conversation we're not really having, and what it takes for farmers to survive inside a system built for scale, not resilience. What stayed with me from this conversation, from both parts, is how much of our current food system depends on invisibility, anonymous products, hidden processes, farmers you don't see and therefore don't know, labels that tell us very little or mislead us, and how powerful it becomes when that curtain gets pulled back. When we start talking about soil biology, nutrient density, school lunches, and what it actually takes to make better food accessible without pushing the cost onto farmers. This is exactly why I started One Bite is Everything and, out of this podcast, the 4 Farmers Movement. And it's why I've also launched my Substack, linked in the show notes. That's where I'm continuing these conversations in writing, sharing deeper context, and inviting your questions, worries, ideas, and observations. This isn't a one-way podcast. It's an ongoing dialogue. And remember, this show lives inside a larger community. One Bite is Everything is in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide, and it consistently sees more engagement than most shows on Spotify because listeners like you care enough to lean in. Through One Bite is Everything and the 4 Farmers Movement, we're building something grounded in farmers' lived experience and eater curiosity, focused on thoughtful questions, considered answers, and actions that matter. Thanks for listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects every bite you take to the bigger world. If today's conversation sparked something for you, remember, the stories you hear here don't end when the episode does. Through the 4 Farmers Movement, these stories become action, supporting small farmers and bringing eaters like you closer to the people who make your food possible. Learn more at 4farmersmovement.com. And join me on Substack to keep this conversation going. Your perspective, even if it's different, is important to the conversation. Your questions, even if you don't think they are worth asking, are actually critical. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope that you will take a moment to rate and review One Bite is Everything on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. It is my goal to add 100 new reviews to the show this year to help more people like you find it. Will you do me that quick favor? I know you're driving or walking or doing the dishes right now, but will you make a mental note to come back to this review idea and leave one? I would really appreciate it. One Bite is Everything. It starts on your plate, and it has a big reach. It's a food podcast and a politics podcast and a health, community, and economy podcast because food touches quite literally everything. This episode was co-produced by Sonia Dillon with sound design and original music by Russell Cheppa. I'm your host, Dana DePrima, and I will see you here again next week for another episode of One Bite is Everything. Until then, eat like it matters, because it does.